So this was a suggestion from my Discord, and I thought I'd do it anyway because I do really love this show, so might as well talk about it. My Name is Earl, the comedy drama series made by Greg Garcia and starring Jason Lee. Now this is a show that I honestly think has one of the most genius premises for any TV show ever made. So here it is. Earl is a character who best describes himself in the opening of the series is the kind of guy who does bad things but wonders why his life sucks. He's basically a total degenerate and also very, very stupid. He lives a very scuzzy life, he's constantly doing crimes because he can't bother to actually get a real job, and even to the people he's supposed to care about, like his wife, he doesn't really care about at all. In the pilot episode, he robs somebody to get a scratch card and ends up winning $100,000. But then is immediately hit by a car and then loses the ticket. While being laid up in the hospital, he eventually realizes, wait, I do bad things and my life sucks right now. And inspired by a talk show that he watches, he realized that if he tries being a good person, good things might happen to him in turn. So he makes a list of all the bad things that he's ever done in his life and decides to make up for every single one of them. And evidently it works, because the first thing he does is pick up some trash, and lo and behold, he finds the ticket. From that point on, pretty much every subsequent episode is him making up for something on his list that he did in the past. But what I like about it is that even though he's doing it for arguably selfish reasons, he doesn't half-arse it. If he finds out that he made somebody else's life interminably worse by his actions, he doesn't shade over it. He will help that person and still fix their life, even if it's something that he didn't do personally, but he knows that he has to help them in any way that he can. After a while, the show becomes more about him trying to fix his own past, but actually just being a good person and trying to help people out in general, and it's a really sweet thing. And that's actually one of the things I love about this show. This is a show that is definitely made for an adult. It's definitely an adult show. But one of the things I have about really adult shows these days, and even some of the older ones, is that they do try a bit too hard to be very bleak and dark, which there's nothing wrong with that. With shows like Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead, which I do like, they do get a little bit too bleak after a while and they start to really depress me. This show is very optimistic and it's all about trying to be a better person. And I really appreciate that, and I think it's a really good thing to have in an adult show. There are some parts where it does almost feel kind of like a kid's show trying to be moralistic, but still, it does the morals in a very clever way, and it is a really satisfying show to watch because, again, Earl is genuinely trying to be a good person. He's not just doing what he does because he wants to have his life be better. He realizes he's been a dick and he wants to actually be a better person as a result. And that's a really good thing to see. Also, the fact that this show is unbelievably well made. Greg Garcia's directing style is sort of a mix between Edgar Wright and James Gunn. Edgar Wright in that he does have a very distinctive camera movement style and very tight editing, but James Gunn in that he has the way in which he lives his life and his kind of sense of humor and the things that he enjoys kind of project into his productions, such as he always has his own personal favorite tunes appear in the show, which is an amazing thing for me because he and I do have very similar music tastes. He loves AC/DC, he loves Deep Purple, he loves Motorhead and other such bands as that. Like I said, very much like a James Gunn movie. And for a show where it doesn't look like they had the biggest budget in the world, I mean this was made by Fox, so they probably gave him a decent budget, but they probably didn't give him the biggest amount. But even so, this show does look amazingly well made. It almost feels very cinematic in some cases. There's a lot of ambitious camera movement, a lot of very ambitious shots, but it doesn't feel like it's going overboard in any way. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be too artsy. It feels appropriate and you just sort of accept that this is the way the show is made and it looks really good. He's also a fantastic guy at working with actors. Every one of the actors who plays the main cast in this show are people that are more indifferent to in other things, but in this show they are amazing and they really make the characters likable. Jason Lee is one of those actors where he's just sort of okay to me. He's done some good stuff in the past, he's done some bad stuff in the past, but normally he hasn't done anything that significant that I say, oh, I love Jason Lee. Except for this. His performance in this is all time one of my favourite performances I've ever seen in anything. He does an amazing job with playing Earl. He is very believable as the modern version of Earl, who is a person who used to do bad things but wants to be a good person. But he's also incredibly believable as the older version of Earl, who is a very degenerate and kind of bad person. But you do see the shades of a better person in there, and his performance completely carries that off. It is unbelievably good. He's very endearing. He is definitely somebody who you can relate to despite how ridiculous some of the situations he finds himself in. And he's just very likable. Ethan Suplee plays his brother Randy, who, again, I've not really had any other opinions for, but again, in this show, he is amazingly good. Randy is basically supposed to be the naive and very empty-headed brother of Earl who blindly follows everything he does. But he's not bad, he's just very misguided. But again, he's totally believable as being this very naive and innocent person who, again, you can see has good elements in him, they're just not being nurtured in the right way. And his overall physique and the look of the character is incredibly well done, especially that very empty-headed, brain-dead look he gives himself all the time. It's completely believable, and as soon as you see him without even having to say anything, you totally get what he's about. Which is another reason I don't think this show could be done now with the way Ethan has made himself look in recent years. Eddie Steeples plays Earl's best friend Crabman, aka Darnell, who is a very interesting character because at first he seems like a very simple and relatively intelligent, nice-seeming guy. But as the show progresses, we find out things about him that we wouldn't expect and find that he's actually got quite a complicated history. But again, the performance makes it completely believable. Even though the kind of persona he's projecting outwards is a bit of an act, we see in flashbacks that there are elements of that person that are still in his actual person. So it's kind of half an act, half who he really is. And again, it's completely believable. But by far, the best performance in this show comes from Jamie Presley. Jamie Presley, out of all the main actors, is the one I like the most. She's very talented and a very good actress, but this is by far her crowning performance. She is amazing as Earl's ex-wife Joy. She's basically meant to be a kind of stereotypical trailer trash, very aggressive and abrasive person. But despite the fact that she is arguably a terrible person and unbelievably selfish, amazingly, she is incredibly likable, and that is actually what the show is aiming for, and it pulls it off beautifully, particularly with Jamie Presley's performance, which is pitch perfect. She gets all the elements that need to be in this character in there, and she knows the points where she's supposed to be a bitch and unlikable, but also the parts where she's supposed to be a likable person that you see under all those layers of abrasiveness. It's perfect. The show also, despite starting off very simple, also actually gets rather more complex as the show goes on, and it actually works pretty well. The first and fourth series are all self-contained episodes, with the exception of one or two multi-parters. But series 2 and 3 were ongoing serialized stories, with the first episode, series 2, being about Joy stealing a truck from a store who won't give her a refund for something she bought from them, and she actually gets charged criminally for that. And pretty much all the B-plots of the remainder of the series are about her dealing with being charged as a criminal for that actual deed, and sometimes Earl helps her out in that. The main A-plots of all the episodes still focus on Earl doing things from his list, but I think it was clever to have the B-plots be an ongoing story, and it's something that I like to see in sitcoms, which technically, I guess this show kind of is, even though there's no laugh track or anything. But it actually turned out really well, and actually gave a great example of character development for more minor characters. The third series, well, spoilers here, but Earl ends up taking the rap for what Joy did to avoid her going to prison. But so he ends up going to prison, and so the majority of series 3 is about his time in prison, and it actually works really well. We haven't actually seen a prison drama done from a more comedic point of view in the past, so it actually is really unique to see, and they do it perfectly. It's very funny, but it's also very poignant about what life is like behind bars. I do like a good prison drama, and this still works as one, but again, it's really very funny at the same time. And then, like I said, Series 4 decided to go back to basics and be self-contained episodes again, with one or two multi-parters going into Darnell's backstory and a few other things. However, the downside is that they knew the show was being cancelled, so what did they do? they end it on a cliffhanger to try and get the series renewed again. And it didn't. So that does really suck. And let's be honest, has that ever worked? Duckman tried it and they never worked. So yeah, stop ending shows in cliffhangers when you know you're going to be cancelled. It doesn't work in getting the show renewed. And it's really sad because Greg Garcia did have a plan in how he wanted the show to end, and it's an amazingly good ending. I've read it and it is an amazingly good way to end the show, but sadly I don't think we'll ever really get to see it. There was a plan to try and revive the show as a Netflix series, but unfortunately that fell through. And like I said, given how much the cast has changed over the years, I don't think it would work if they did it again. But overall, I really highly recommend this show. It's an amazingly good show, and it actually really gives you a sense of optimism and really makes you feel good about the human race. And it's on Disney Plus in its entirety now, so it's not that hard to track down. But let's see what I tick off my list next time.